Demonic energies had gotten into her field through plastic surgery that she had had 20 years ago. Now, this came through a client shadow work session where she found these blockages herself. She presented with some blockages in her jaw and chin area, and I knew she'd had plastic surgery there, and I felt like this was connected. And so I started asking questions, and lo and behold, it was connected. It was a huge aha moment for her because she had never thought about the repercussions of plastic surgery at a soul level, okay? What she found in this blockage were negative contracts with the doctors, the medical facility. There was like this black liquid type energy in her jaw and chin area. She also had like an energetic wound where the doctor had cut to put the implant in. The other interesting thing that came through was that her body told her clearly it no longer wanted this implant there. Like she had never tuned into that. It also gave her a timeline to remove it, and we discussed that her consciousness had to catch up with her body consciousness. So that's something for her to work through, to do soul level shadow work on. The other interesting thing is we also worked on a different surgery, and this was a life-saving surgery. And although negative energies had gotten in through that, there was different energetic consequences to that kind of surgery. So know that if you've had any kind of surgery, including plastic surgery, which is more demonic, Anthony William, Medical Medium, says that in his new book, it is important to address this at a spiritual soul level so you don't keep carrying these energies, negative entities with you moving forward, okay? It's important to heal. You can do this through shadow work sessions with me or energy healing sessions, which are the Golden Alchemy or Angelic Soul Alignment healing sessions. My client in a shadow work session found a portal in her body that wouldn't close. And we went through that portal to find that there was a piece of her soul from a past life stuck in this other dimension. And that part of her soul was actually dark and was actually in a tortured state, caught in the darkness with a collective of other souls. And in that session, we not only healed that soul part of her, but also the collective of souls that were stuck there. So released a lot of souls out of this darkness, okay, that they were caught in. The reason I'm sharing this with you is your soul is much more complex than the here and now, than this lifetime. You may be a positive, benevolent being in this lifetime, but there could be other versions of you in past lives that weren't that. And likely that probably has happened, okay? So it's important to understand that that version of you could be affecting you in the now. And as you become more conscious, learn to start doing conscious soul healing work, especially if you're the kind of soul that's on this kind of mission. You can go back and heal all these other aspects and start releasing darkness out of the quantum fields, which makes this world more light. Darkness has less hold if you start healing all these aspects of self. And in this case, this soul also has the ability to do collective work, and it's part of her soul mission. Not every soul is here to work at the collective level, but this person has that ability, very psychic, and she's here to do this work. She's here to become more conscious. And if that's you, know that you have a bigger responsibility, and your ability to affect change at a spiritual level, at a quantum level, is much greater than other people. It might make your journey harder, more challenging, but know that you have agreed to do this, so there's a bigger soul calling for this, okay? And you can sometimes not feel well in your own field until you start clearing this. And in this case, she had a portal affecting her stomach, and this portal was connected to this other dimension. And healing this freed this soul in such a big way, and also freed hundreds of other souls that would have never done this work on their own. My client healed her brain fog in one shadow work session with me, just one, pretty mind-blowing. This is really interesting because one of the things that I'm always teaching you guys is that your most stubborn symptoms can have both a physical and energetic root cause. Now, it varies. Some symptoms are going to be mostly physical, some are going to be mostly energetic, but usually it's a combination of the two. And if you address the energetic while you're also healing the physical, it can accelerate your healing and even release your symptoms very quickly. Now, this client came to me with brain fog as one of their most persistent symptoms, affecting their ability to function daily in their lives. This person did a full 6-month package with me, so we were working at both the physical level. I was doing energy healing on her, and she was learning to do shadow work with me. So depending on when you have a symptom that's rooted in an energetic factor, it may require a different level of consciousness to heal that energetic root cause. By that, I mean sometimes I can release it through an energy healing, but sometimes only you can release the symptom. And in this case, this person was doing their second shadow work session with me, and they were able to go into the brain fog, release the shadow energies contributing to it, and the symptom released and has not come back since. A negative entity was attached to her eyeball and was stopping her ability to heal her eye and cleanse it fully while doing medical medium protocols. Now, this is kind of a crazy story, but it's true, and it happens to a lot of my clients. When you release negative entity attachments, you can start healing faster, cleansing faster, because they can slow your process down physically and energetically. They create lots of problems in people's fields. So this client bought a shadow work session package with me, 3-session package. In her second session, she found a negative reptilian attached to her eye. And we removed that reptilian. I taught her how to do it. It was her first time ever removing a negative entity, and she's continued to do it since then. And when she removed that and was able to receive healing into that eye, within a few hours, she started detoxing pretty intensely through that eye. I've seen this with other clients. And she told me that several years before, she had been diagnosed with some dermatitis in her eye, and the doctor at that time had given her steroid cream to put over her eyelid. And my guides told me that through that steroid cream, a negative entity had actually attached to her eyeball. And when we removed that negative entity, her body was able to go in and start healing and cleansing that out. And yeah, it accelerated her healing. My client was as attached to her negative entity attachment as it was attached to her. This is pretty mind-blowing and really important to understand if you are on a greater healing journey. Now, this person came to me for a shadow work session series. This was her second shadow work session. And in her second session, she saw a negative entity pretty soon into the session. Now, this negative entity couldn't just be removed. It would not go. It was running around her body, shape-shifting, doing naughty things. So I knew there was more to the story. So I started asking questions to my client, to the negative entity, to understand what the story was. And what came out in the session was that my client had had a period in her life where she felt very alone, very separate from God, and had this unmet need, and she needed a friend. And then shows up a negative entity who's also looking for a friend, and it attached to her. So in the session, the negative entity was sometimes being very naughty, sometimes being very sweet and loving, and she had an emotional attachment to it. So I told her she needed to unravel and heal the aspects of herself that were attached to this negative entity. And when that was healed, the negative entity would release, and that's exactly what happened. My client had a negative entity attached to her that was also attached to thousands of other people. Now, I've told you guys that negative entities can do this, and this is a really great example of what negative entities can do at a collective level. So in this case, this was a shadow work session, my client's third shadow work session. And in that session, we found 2 artificial energies within her energy field that had been merged with her field over 2 different past lives. And these were part of a plan to integrate her into an artificial type of intelligence system, which a lot of people have issues like this. And they were affecting her in reincarnations because they were attached to her. Removing these attachments was a huge healing for her soul. And when we removed the second layer of this attachment that was in her thigh, Beneath that were 4 negative entities that were attached, that had been part of attaching these artificial energies to her. 3 of them agreed to leave right away. They were very apologetic, and the 4th one did not want to go. He was being kind of a jerk. And so once we talked to him and helped him understand why it wasn't his highest healing to leave and go back to source to have his own healing, he then showed us that he was also attached to thousands of others. All those people had this negative entity removed, and they all received a healing. So this was a huge session. I had a craving for junk food that came from a soul fracture attached to me. That was my dad's sister's soul fracture. She died a long time ago. I'm going to explain to you the story and talk about cravings through this. So I've been healing with medical medium protocols for over 7 years. When I started, I understood that cravings could be connected to physical things, including pathogens craving the foods that they desired, or deficiencies in my body and me not consciously being able to connect to what that craving for something rich in glucose actually meant in terms of what's actually healthy for my body. But as you're healing and continuing on your healing journey, you will find as you heal those physical factors connected to cravings, other things can surface, even when you're actually healing the physical factors. Cravings can be rooted in real emotional needs. A lot of us emotionally eat, have done that for over our lifetime. But cravings can also come from emotional wounds. Like if they come out of nowhere, there could be parts of you that are needing some kind of assistance, and it's just they're used to being connected to a food or a craving in your body. Now, this happened to me the other day. I had a very nourishing, fat-free dinner, and after the dinner, I started craving junk food really, really strongly. Now, I've never really been a big junk food person in my life. I've always eaten pretty clean, not medical medium clean until 7 years ago, but I've always eaten pretty clean. And so, because I do a lot of shadow work, I started listening to the craving. It was coming from a band of energy from down my chest, like right below my throat down. And I was listening to this. I immediately knew it was my sister. It wasn't actually me. It was a soul fracture of hers that had attached to me. We didn't have good boundaries when we were kids. It was a lot of trauma. So she had attached to me. And my sister was a huge junk food addict. So this craving all of a sudden made total sense to me. It lost its power when I understood where it was coming from. And then I ensured that she detached from me and went back to source to join her soul, because that's where she belongs. So anyways, interesting story. And yes, soul fractures from other people, even dead people, can be attached to you. So if you're struggling with cravings, sometimes it means you need to look deeper and not just muscle through it. Get conscious about it and understand where it's rooted from, and that makes it so much easier to heal. A negative entity was causing thoughts to continuously loop in my head. Now, I want to get into this further, but I want you to know a lot of people come to me struggling to deal with the thoughts that are happening in their head, the images that they're getting in their head. Now, this can be caused by toxic heavy metals. Medical Medium has written a lot about this. It can be caused by soul injuries, patterns we developed in our childhood, patterns we absorbed from our parents, traumas in our lifetime. But it can also be caused by negative entities. Oftentimes, if it's a really, really hard, stuck symptom or symptoms going on in the mental health field of your healing, it's probably a combination of all three. It's important to address the foundational layer of the physical healing before moving into deeper kind of consciousness work or shadow work, which is what I teach my clients once they've addressed enough of the heavy metals. Now, in this case, I was actually doing shadow work at the time when I noticed that there was something going on with my thoughts. I was trying to work on a different part of my body, and my thoughts, like in the front of my brain, they were constantly looping or fixated on one topic, and I didn't know why. I was trying to divert my attention so I could do my shadow work on the focused piece I was working on, but then I realized I need to do shadow work on my these thoughts, which you can do shadow work on them. So I tuned in the energy to understand what was the root cause of this thought or this energy of thoughts looping in my head. And immediately I saw a very, very large entity with tentacles that were it was on my forehead, and the tentacles were going into my brain, and it was pushing on different parts of my brain, like electrical activity, and it was causing these energy of thoughts that I didn't even need to have, that weren't even important to me, to continuously loop. And so what I did is I released the negative entity that was attached to it, and the thoughts completely dissolved, did not come back. I didn't even feel them. So in this case, these thoughts were just caused by the negative entity, trying to keep me in a loop, to keep my focus away from my deeper healing. My client's chronic neck and shoulder stiffness pain released in one shadow work session. Let's get into the story, because it's really useful for the work you're all doing with Anthony's new book, with medical medium healing, and even beyond that, okay? So this client had this injury several years ago. Somebody had been driving recklessly, demonically, and had caused an automobile accident, and she'd had an injury. Had been doing medical medium protocols for a long time, and when we went into this part that was hurting, that was stiff in her body, she immediately connected to it needing a physical solution because it was tight. So she felt like she needed a massage, but because the way I work, I knew we could try to release it right then and there, okay? So the first thing we did was, when we tuned in, she realized she had a lot of anger at this person, and she'd been holding on to it for a long time, and it was causing a massive energetic blockage where that injury had happened. So we worked through that layer, and the pain started releasing. I also knew that this person was behaving demonically when this accident happened. So we brought out a tool from Medical Medium, the Past Hurt Seeker, and she used that tool, and the pain released even more. It fully resolved, okay? She was blown away, and when she did that, my guidance system, my team in spirit, explained to me that she'd become enlightened a little bit by doing that. And what does that mean? Is that she was holding on to energy, not only from this person's demon that was making more darkness in her body and her consciousness and the way she was feeling, but she was also holding on to this anger towards him, okay? So it was keeping her in a lower kind of density. And so Anthony explains enlightenment as becoming more and more light, and it can be through a consciousness process. So this was a conscious process of releasing any connection or bondage she had to this person, to this demon. And what happened instead is that symptom released, her consciousness expanded, she became more enlightened, and she also gained tools to go forward to continue to heal her physical body and energetic body and spiritual bodies at an even deeper, more profound level.